What's up, everybody? This is Erzio99, and today we will be covering flying in space and getting from place to place in Eve. If you take a look at the map, Eve is freaking huge. So being able to get around and navigate in space is pretty much a necessity. So I'm going to be covering some of the basics, how to move around, how to do so without making yourself a huge target. First off, if you're going to travel any kind of distance, it's always best to set a destination. Just if you know the system name, you can type it into the search feature as I just did. Right click it in the result, hit set destination. By default, the game will route you the safest way possible. It will avoid low sec. However, you can go into your autopilot settings and opt for shorter routes, or prefer to stay in lower security space. This is handy especially if you're -5 sec status, because if you enter secured space, you run the risk of getting shot at by the faction navies and anyone who happens to see you. But by and large, most people just hit prefer safer. Go ahead and close out of that. As you can see, the systems are listed, and you can see the color coding for their security status. So you can see the starting system, the ending system, the number of jumps on the route. So let's get moving. Alrighty, me and my terrible Merlin. Now you can see here on the overview, now I have all brackets engaged, that's why you see all the little dots everywhere. But here on the overview, you'll notice one of the stargates is highlighted in yellow. This is the next destination for the autopilot route. Now normally you would go down here, click that, and you would go into autopilot. It would warp to the stargate at 15 kilometers. You would slow boat up to the gate, and it would jump. Rinse and repeat until you got to your destination. I don't use autopilot because, well, quite frankly, it's slow as hell, and it makes you a target. So I don't use it. What you can do here, you can click on the gate in the overview, go up here to the selection window. You can see a line. All this does is orient your ship towards that fixed object. Of course, I'm moving at full speed. You have the option of warp within 0, which will obviously do what it says it does, and then jump. Now, with the Crucible expansion, this normally was not available unless you were within 2,500 meters of the gate. But now, you just click jump. As you can see, of course, I instantly warp because I'm at full speed. You only need to be at 75% speed to go into warp. We will warp to the Stargate and jump automatically. So it's a pretty nice little setup. Of course, as you can see, the jump number decreased, and of course local change because I entered a new system. Now what you can also do is you can right click an object. Of course it says warp within 0, which is the same as that button there. You can set it to warp within. This is handy for getting distant warp ins if you're camping a gate. You want to stay away from the gate for various reasons.
Warp drive active.
Now you'll notice my ship decloaked. Whenever you enter a new system, you are cloaked for 30 seconds. So it gives you time to get your bearings. Really comes in handy in low sec and null sec, so you can get the lay of the land just in case there's a gate camp. Figure out how you're going to get by it. As you can see, I warped in right about 30 kilometers away. Now, you can also warp, of course, to planets. And you can add more and more to your overview. I'll be covering that in more detail in the future. Expand these columns out a little bit. Now you can see the square item there. That's a station. You just click the dock button and you'll automatically warp and dock. Notice there's a bit of a spin up. It has to get aligned. Once it gets aligned at 75%, it warps away. It's not really noticeable, of course, because I'm in a Merlin, I'm in a frigate, but larger ships, especially like the Orca, the freighter, take forever to align and get up to speed. The ships are huge, and their align and warp times really extenuate that fact. As you can see, I've docked.
Docking request accepted.
So that should be it. There is one important caveat. You will not be able to dock or jump through a Stargate within about 45 seconds to a minute of any aggressive action. So that's why you'll sometimes hear of people saying they need to de-aggress in order to make that way you can, if you are offensive action, you have to either stop what you're doing and go hide, or you have to wait the time, 45 seconds to a minute, before you can jump or dock. And this is mainly to prevent, douchebaggery when it comes to ship combat, trying to get a few licks in on somebody and then, docking up or running to a space station or going through a Stargate. So it's a big deal there. And that should cover the basics as far as navigating in space. There is one more thing I should cover. Now normally, for example, mission runners will have access to a bookmark for their mission, also any bookmarks you make in space. You just right click. Now as you can see, I have corporation locations in this system. I have staging bookmarks for the asteroid belts because this corporation is a mining corporation. I can also drill down and go through all the various relevant celestial objects, a planet, the customs offices, any moons it has, This is a bit more of a dicey proposition in nullsec, especially because there may be a control tower there and it may want to shoot at you if you're in the wrong spot. But you'll also see personal locations just above this if I had any bookmarks in the system. And then you can warp to it just as if it were a regular celestial object. We'll go ahead and warp to 1 just to show off the feature.
Warp drive active.
There is also an important little caveat to warping. It doesn't have to be the huge interstellar distances when it comes to warping. You can actually warp locally in this area. I think there's there's an asteroid. We highlight the asteroid. You'll notice it says warp within 0. This is one section of space where you can see things. It's called the grid. I set these bookmarks about 160 to 180 kilometers above the asteroid belts and ice belts in the system, so that I can pick and choose where I go. And I'll just click warp within 0.
Drive active.
And all of a sudden, whee! And now I'm down in amongst the belts. All the asteroids. Pretty nice little setup there. And of course I have, because I'm showing all brackets, I can see the various points for the moons and asteroid belts and whatnot, even though they're not in my overview. Now of course I'm doing this on this character because he's in high sec and no one's really not a lot of people around. You do not want to show all brackets in a fleet fight. Your computer will cry and then you will be DC'd. So it's very important to be able to move around. It makes you much harder target by staying flexible and mobile. So you always want to keep that on your mind, especially if you're in PvP, because the guy who sits still is the guy who gets killed. And that should cover basic ambulation in space. Also, don't think that you're limited in your ability to maneuver. Obviously, you can do more than straight lines. You can orbit. And of course, you can choose approach on an item. I'll obviously just keep moving toward it. You can orbit your target at a range. Handy for keeping yourself in optimals. Of course, he's going to move away and orbit the target. Keep at range. This is a handy feature to have if you're in a fleet situation. FCs will often designate a person that everyone keeps at range so that they're not all randomly running around everywhere. Keep the formation tight, keeps things easier for logistics pilots, and you have a much better chance of being in range of the person he calls primary. So that's always important. Of course, you can choose look at, which just moves your camera drone. Click that little button there, reset camera, put it back to where it's supposed to be. Another little feature, Eve does not have manual flight controls per se. What it does have, however, is the ability to double click in space. So yeah, I'm just moving up now. Just double click over there, and the ship starts going that way. This is another one that's handy. Allows you to stay more flexible in your movement. You're not bound by objects in your overview. I'm just gonna sit here and orbit this. Yeah, you can do so much more. You just can't control it with like a stick or keyboard commands. It's usually not that big a deal. Usually you're orbiting something, or you're following an FC. Just a handy way to keep transversal on an object, so you're not running into them head on, because it's much easier for them to hit you. So you juke to one side, and now anyone shooting at me along this plane is going to have a little more difficult time, as opposed to me flying directly at them or directly away from them. So that should pretty much cover flying in space. The next tutorial will cover the overview and its insane complexities. That one might be a bit of a long one, but I'll show you. I'll provide a link to one of the overview setups that I use. It allows you to customize things. It's a pretty nice setup. But of course, any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the comment section. You can follow me on Twitter at Urziel99, and you can of course email me at urziel99@gmail.com. Thanks for watching, and take care of yourself.